Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and today we'll be focusing on the presidential activities in the past week, producing and of course inaugurating a number of factories around the country, more specifically the military factory 300 in Egypt in the past week, and inaugurating a number of factories across Egypt in different governorates to be producing loaders and military equipment and electric vehicles as well in Egypt. We'll be seeing that and the production of those factories in the near future. And tonight I'm honored to be having with me in the studio to be focusing on such an important step in the history of the economy of Egypt and the manufacturing of Egypt and the industry of Egypt as well. Engineer Ahmed Al-Kafrawi, the member of the Presidential Leadership Program, the PLP. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And Engineer H.Shamarka, the Planning and Development Expert. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
We will be starting straight away with a report about the presidential activities in the past week and the inauguration of a number of factories affecting positively the economic activity in the country for the upcoming months and years. So let's see it.
Egypt unveiled the first loader to be completely manufactured inside the factories and workshops of the Military Production Ministry. It is totally an Egyptian industry, with the exception of the motor and the rubber. It was designed and implemented by the International Marathon United Technologies. The loader was manufactured by Dr. Michael Knight, one of Egypt's scientists abroad who cooperates with the Ministry of Military Production in several joint projects. The new Egyptian loader has been completely manufactured inside factories affiliated to the Ministry of Military Production with 100% Egyptian labor, where young engineers worked around the clock to implement in its record time until it comes to light in a way that matches international standards. It represents a model for the Egyptian national industry and will take part in various national projects of the Egyptian state. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had opened earlier last week the Abu Zabal Company for Specialized Industries Military Factory 300 after the completion of renovation works. During President al-Sisi's visit, a number of Egyptian national products were announced in the military and civil industries. Moreover, the first model of the new Egyptian loader had been unmasked, in addition to a modern tank developed within the factories of the Ministry of Military Production.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and that was a report about the presidential activities in the past week in the attendance of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The Ministry of Military Production unveiled the first Egyptian-made loader in a ceremony attended by the President. Engineer Ahmed Al-Shamarka, how do you see such an achievement in the history of industry and manufacturing in the country?
Thank you, Ahmed. First, I'd like to commend the administration for taking such a great step in the second term. It comes in sequence with what have been happening in the first term in terms of urban development and new cities and bringing on board all the economic platforms that actually contribute to having the blue-collar sort of amalgamation and just starting to categorize the certain manufacturers. Yes. And the product lines that we can actually achieve. starting with construction, understanding the raw materials that's available and start utilizing it to stop being dependable on the Western or on exports in general. And starting actually bringing the blue collar and having more labor which are skilled, using good technology, new cutting edge technology, becoming a competitor in the manufacture world instead of being just being supplied to.
Yes, Engineer Ahmed Al-Kafrawi, how do you see the step of having a fully made loader in Egypt, of course, as we did see in the ceremony attended by the President?
As my colleague here just said, we see this as a second step after the first term. The second term of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi have been focused on industrial development in general. We've seen this going through all the ministries that are supporting him with the government, with GAFI having new free zones, and with the military production having new factories every now and then. We've seen a lot of collaborations, and now, as mentioned again before, focusing on what materials we have, focusing on the calibers that we own and how we can develop them and how we can use them and utilize them into actually making a made in Egypt brand, help us export more, help us work on developing our national GDP and increasing our economy. So I think this is one step in a big development line that we need to keep following up to reach where this country needs to be and where we want it all to be.
Yes, as an engineer, could be shedding more light on the manufacturing and the assembly of the loader in Egypt?
Well, it starts with the engineering, and as it was mentioned in the report, we use from the inception, we start using the Egyptian skills from engineering, doing the concept of what we want to do, what sort of raw materials are available to us, and what sort of quality that we can provide. Then it goes into the product line itself and how we can actually import the different ways and methods of actually applying that within to be suitable for the Egyptian labor, and having to actually train the Egyptian, the laborers that works in the manufacturers to use those product lines, and then ending up with the assembly and how the assembly is done to assure the quality of the product so that it can be exported, as my colleague have mentioned. Reaching to the point that you start actually using them in construction projects around the country, and making sure that you enhance this product line through life cycles. And you start doing this in every product line, every brand that we use. It can start being Egyptian. You can start wearing Egyptian clothes. You can start using Egyptian cars, electric Egyptian cars,
yes,
and so on and so forth. So from inception to cradle, as we say, it's all done by Egyptian skilled labor. People that have actually got the education and the knowledge from the best doing it around the world. And now it's being imported into our market so that the Egyptian population can get the best of it without needing to be dependable anymore, which is, as mentioned as well, a part of a grand plan reaching that we become sustainable and we can actually compete in different platforms around the world.
Yes, how important is it to be depending on Egyptians in terms of manufacturing and industry and, of course, the economic activity in general, in your opinion?
In the past year, we've seen Egypt with its skilled labor and its skilled engineers, qualified engineers, and even very high calibers. We've seen them put together Western designed products. We're talking about several vehicle brands that have been putting together their cars in Egypt. This has been going on for years. We've been all hearing about it. I think now comes the time, like happened before, and now we're restarting the process. We're putting our skilled labor and our brains into work for our own good. So this is only the start of a new era. If we have, from the smallest product, as for example, the loader is not a small product, but it's one step. Electric vehicles is another step. We've seen the inauguration of the military production factory 300, which is serving the ammunition for our army. I think this mentality and this direction is very important for us to be. It's not being dependent and not using any outside experience or any Western experience or benefiting from it. No, not like that. On the contrary, we use it and we use it to help us to develop our own. We have a competitive product. We use it to help or export to our neighboring countries. We mentioned this before, but we are the gate to Africa. A lot of countries in Africa might not be capable to pay for a premium price for a Western product, but we can be placed in a very competitive area where we can actually place our product and have a huge benefit from it, and this can be positively returning to our economy. So I think it's adamant that we need that in the current stage of Egypt. Egypt have been stable in the past few years, and we're actually developing on several platforms. So this is one very, very important platform that we need to work on.
Yes, how would you assess the success of the government under the directives of President Al-Sisi to be carrying out the economic reform program in the past few years?
Well, we can look at the projections, the factors. We can look at the foreign currency going back, which means that the Egyptian pound is getting stronger. This shows the marking of good economy, good behavior in the economy. You have good exports as a reaction to having products which can be now exported after the devaluation of the currency. You became very attractive in terms of your pricing and the product that you provide. So this was part of the economic reform that actually was very applicable to this time specifically. It was a hard time, yes, the first term,
yes,
on most of the public, just to be clear. But of course, it takes time to do the reform after what have been done in the 13 or 14 years before it, in terms of economic degradation and just decline, especially with losing the African part, as my colleague have mentioned. We, as well, it's very important, and I will use the same term, it's adamant to actually take the best advantage of what's happening with the African Eastern and Western. So you have the COMESA, which is the common market of the
and we were
Eastern.
Head of the African Union in the past year.
Exactly, and now you have, for example, even ports, which looking to facilitate the ways of, instead of using like LO, which is load on and load off, you're using RO, which is roll on and roll off the boats, and to make it easier even to deal with our African, and to deal with our African neighbors, because they have a lot of raw materials, and we can start being the gateway again to transfer and to enhance and to actually have a unified market that brings Egypt, that gives it a leap in terms of the economic reform. In no time, I'm sure 4 years or something, we will start actually seeing a return that becomes very lucrative to the all the categories of the society.
Yes, we've been through the hard part of the economic reform program, but how did you see the vision or the strategy of President Abdel Fattah Al-Sisi and the current government in terms of having a better economy and the sustainable development by the year 2030?
Well, in His Excellency's first term, he focused on infrastructure, as we mentioned before. We focused on roads. He focused on tunnels, water, electricity, main infrastructure for the country, and it's the natural second step, let me say, to start working on how to build on it. So when His Excellency's government decided to work on a plan, they focused on industrial revolution or industrial development. Industrial development, we've seen since 2018, it started working with free zones, industrial areas throughout the canal. We've seen agreements with several governments, whether the Russian, Chinese, Spanish, and more. We've seen new free zones all over Egypt and enhanced free zones. The free zone in Alexandria to help the ports, as my colleague just mentioned. In Port Said, we've seen again another, I would say again, industrial revolution in the port. We've seen a lot of enhancement to the ports, adding to the COMESA that you guys mentioned. There is the new African trade agreement, which is going to be throughout the whole of Africa. We're not talking about 26 countries anymore. We're talking an open trade between Africa. So we have to capitalize on that. We have to work on actually gaining from that as a government, and this is exactly what they're looking after. We've seen a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, the parliament was going through with the Upper Egypt Industrial Development Authority, which is led by, I think, General Sami Mansour. This new authorities that are coming up, and this is not the only one, by the way, but this is the one off the top of my head, but we've seen authorities focused on enhancing raw material, stop exporting raw materials that's not acceptable anymore in terms of norms, and now we're looking into industrializing the raw material and actually try selling a product, whether this is in the national market or the international market. I think this is, again, as I mentioned before, as a new or a reformed way of thinking, through working out through the government, whether with GAFI, with the new national authorities, with the ports, with all the ministries. Actually, they've been working on developing the industries and looking into them, not like we used to do before, how to benefit here, now and then. We're talking about planning. We're talking about a look forward, how to gain on the longer term, and there's proper calibers working on that. We've seen now Egypt is actually witnessing for the first time its own calibers up in the light.
Yes.
Before, maybe because of what was going on, these calibers were not seen. They were not taking their full potential. There is His Excellency also focused on the youth, and now the youth is taking a huge role in the new development, and we're all seeing the aspects of using youth in these government entities. So I think we're going forward and upward.
Yes, speaking of going forward, how do you see the contribution of the Ministry of Military Production in terms of having an economic development in the country, not just for producing military equipment, but for the economy and the industry in Egypt in general?
Well, we always need to learn from the history. And in the Industrial Revolution, starting in the 18th century in Britain, it was based first on agriculture, and then it started perpetuating into the having surplus in certain raw materials, starting to utilizing them in manufacture all sorts of products, and then it was the entrepreneurs. See, this is the time that people need to bet on the youth, that investors need to start. Now the facilitations exist, like my colleagues mentioned. The facilitations that have been applied by the authorities and have been applied by the administration has been done. Now it's time for the Egyptian investors and the foreign investors to bet on the youth, to bet on the labor in the age groups. We have 60% of the population is between the age of 20 and 60, I believe, or something of that sort, which makes it, this is the category that's going to actually help the economic reform and help achieve the plan that was set by the administration. So it's time for us to start gaining momentum by starting to utilize the youth and giving them a chance to be leading those sorts of factories and those sort of manufacture lines and those sort of free zones and so on and so forth. This is the only way that we can actually get a return to every person in the population and to start bringing the whole community up in terms of economy, in terms of society, in terms of knowledge, education, so on and so forth. So,
yes. How important is it to be having the Ministry of Military Production involved in the economy in general and the industry in general, and not just for producing military equipment, in your opinion?
Well, the Ministry of Military Production is working with, not working with actually the, let's say, the owner of several factories. We have Factory 200, military Factory 200, now 300 for ammunition. And we've seen several factories that are owned and operated by the military production. But what's interesting that they're not only working with factories, now they have one of the most reputable construction companies also in the market. You have the National Construction Company of the Military Production. And it's been working for the past, I think, 4 years or something like that. And they, if I'm not mistaken, in the past year, they've worked with 25 billion Egyptian pounds. We've seen their yearly revenue increasing year after year. They're helping their big portion of the support to the military for sure and the army, but also to the national economy. They're not only working with military products, as you mentioned. Now we've seen, we're looking at studies with electric cars. We've seen the National Company for Military Production in Construction working with the new Damietta Furniture City, creating new cooperations and consortiums with international companies to work on developing hotels, hospitals, and so on and so forth in such industrial zones. So again, the direction is the same. The whole government is working into, or the administration is working into industrial development and hand in hand with general development. And the military production is not the only, but one of the pillars that is helping for that to actually succeed.
Yes, we did see the strategy of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the government to be building new cities all over the country, building a new capital, new Alamein city, new Ismailia city, different new cities in different parts of the country. So we needed equipment to be building and to be enhancing the infrastructure of Egypt. Why is it important to be having an Egyptian-made loader or equipment or vehicles made here in Egypt in this part of the history of the country?
Well, it's the economic models and the political economic models are very they're very limited in terms of how we can do things in order to develop a country. Now, the administration worked very hard in order to achieve what we call the prime pumping sort of method of pushing and doing the ripple effect to move the market when it was stagnant. And the administration did this in the first term by utilizing the liquidity and utilizing the capital in terms of doing the new cities that actually bring on board foreign direct investments.
Yes.
And bring on board that actually enhances tourism again, that provides new economic projections and outlets to bring in income. But to answer both questions, to be honest, first, it's very significant to have the military providing the first initiative. Because there's an authority, there's a leadership, and this has been done great.
They're the backbone.
Yeah, there's the backbone of the country, exactly. And secondly is, why do we need to have this? Not only for the national market to provide, it's not about using the national products in the national market, it's more about exporting the products. Look at the Chinese, how they started. Look at look at any country that has great population numbers and started doing manufactures, starting having their own product line, their own brands, their own quality, and then they start exporting them. It hikes up the whole economy, it provides sustainability, and then you can start it and using it in the national market. It's not the objective. The real objective is for us to start exporting those sort of very monopolized products. So a loader there's a number of manufacturers in the world that does it. Today you're competing with this number, so if the number is 5, you became the number 6. That's a great achievement.
Do you think we have the potential to be competing, not just producing?
We were blessed with a population that can do miracles. I don't doubt that the solidarity of the Egyptian administration with the people can actually start competing and manufacturing and exporting in no time. We need to have faith in the vision, and we need to work as a unit in order to achieve this to the country, and by it we all reach the returns, each one of us. On the personal side, we start actually getting the returns.
Yes, I have two questions now. Faith in the vision, that's a very good statement. Faith in the vision, do you think that the Egyptians have now faith in the vision of the president and the government during his first tenure and the second tenure? Do you think it is getting, the dream is getting bigger and it is getting real every day on the ground in Egypt?
I think we are getting there. We're not there yet, but we are getting there. Having faith in the vision for our national population requires somehow, how to say, but first-hand experience, let's say. So you need to feel it. They kind of need to see it. And this is what we're witnessing now. We've capitalized on the human capital of Egypt, and now what is required for us to actually produce? As my colleague just mentioned, faith in the vision. To put in very simple terms, there is a system. You follow the system. You start working with the system. You don't have a problem with the calibers. We never had a problem with the calibers. Our Egyptian calibers have been all over the world. Name a country and they're there and they're representing. But at the end of the day, once you start putting the system in place, everyone will start following. It will follow. It will not come overnight for sure, but it will definitely come step by step. And this is where I see it going now. And as we mentioned, if now are 5 manufacturers in the world producing, and we're number 6, we're already competing. You're in the top 10. So maybe you're not the best product, but as I mentioned, not everyone in the world needs the best product. We need to have a good product, and then it becomes a better product. If you look back into history, when Germany started Made in Germany, it was actually by force. They were forced to actually put Made in Germany, so no one can buy their product. And look at it now. Now Germany is the best product. You see a Made in Germany and it's a best product. So you have to start. You cannot decide without starting. So we started. That's the hardest point. Going forward is the easy path. We just need to follow the system.
Yes, and the second part of my question is the initiative that was made by the Ministry of Military Production in this field, in industry and the economy. Do you think that this would be opening the door and opening the gate for the small and medium enterprises and the smaller investments to be going this way, to be having, as you said, made in Egypt more in the future?
Well, it's not new to the military production ministry. As I mentioned earlier, they have many factories that have been running in the past years, and now they are highlighting these factories and along with the authorities legitimatizing the rules and again system and way to go forward. We've seen a lot of small companies and SMEs working with biodiesel, working with the internet, working with software development, working with several industries. So they, as you said, they are also the gateway into actually making entrepreneurs work and develop their own systems, and this is the base of the economy. We are 100 million today, and we have
105, I think.
So you need how can I say, you need 1% to be the thinkers, and then everyone can help make this dream happen.
Yes, speaking of dreams, we did see the contributions of the Egyptians living abroad, like the Egyptian scientist Michael or Michel Knight living abroad, and he contributed in this dream and having a fully made loader in Egypt for the first time. How do you see the contributions of the Egyptians living abroad, not just Mohamed Salah in football?
I think all the Egyptian living abroad, I think even the two guests that you have today, we lived abroad a little bit. it's very important for now to send a message to everyone to say it is time to come back. It is time to start doing for the country instead of doing to other countries. It might be you're still picking in the momentum. As my colleague said, it's 1% planners and 99% believers. I'm going to use the term
Better,
believers.
better,
Better believers, and it's definitely the contribution is significant, because how else we're going to transfer the know-how? We need, and again, the calibers that have been doing any industry, whether in medical, construction, engineering, chemicals, whatever it is, any Egyptian has excelled in their place in an international base, and they became pioneers. Why? Because they just needed the facilitations. That's it. So now if we have the facilitation, it's time for the people living abroad, having those calibers, they have the responsibility to come back and start using and utilizing everything that they can have, they can actually help with, to help the whole Egyptian population, the national dream.
Yes, one of the visions that we did see under President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi during his tenure is that there is a dependence, or is a bridge or a connection between the Egyptians living inside of Egypt and the Calibers living outside of Egypt for the sake of the country. How do you see the importance of such a step?
It's very important in terms of the first. There is a category that actually aspires to still go out, which we need to start changing their mindset. Yeah, you don't need to go out to become significant or to make money. Or this is the youth, and those are the building blocks of the society and the building blocks of the economic reform. Whether we like it or not, this is the reality. And to have the connection with the Egyptians living abroad, again, I go back to the responsibility of the people living abroad to transfer the image that abroad is not the same anymore. That look at the markets around us, they have sustained themselves, whether it's the Gulf area, the MENA area in general. And Egypt is actually the pinnacle of the region at this time.
Right now.
To have good booming sort of entrepreneurial and growth and so on and so forth. And that goes back to the SMEs. So SMEs are the building block in terms of having financial institutes, having economic reform, having this, having that. Adding it with the blue collar. It's all part of the network and the web, which our colleagues are working on with the administration to put it forward. But it's the belief. We need to believe in that.
Yes, as an Egyptian who lived outside of Egypt or abroad for a number of years, how do you see the importance of changing the mindset, as you said, changing how you see Egypt, the image of Egypt under President al-Sisi now, for the people to be returning back to the country?
Well, I will refer to our own debate before we actually start our discussion. Basically, Egypt now is changing into the land of opportunities, especially for Egyptians. If it's now being very attractive for foreign investment, how do you think it looks for Egyptians? We were just discussing between ourselves that a proper, and when I use the word proper, I mean someone who's following the rules and working hard. So a hard-working Egyptian can achieve a lot of things in Egypt today. Working with the government, working in the private sector, working to start your own business. These sectors are all now wide open and ready to listen, ready to have you start your business. If you look to any successful economy that came up from the ground, Brazil, India, and more. You look at SMEs, you look at young entrepreneurs working on their small garage businesses and similar to bring the economy upwards. And this is what we've seen with the Ministry of Investment and free zones. They started having new rules, new regulations to help Egyptians start their own businesses. You now have the one-person company. You have several types of companies for you to be able to start your business, work. Industrial licenses are now becoming very easy, of course, if you follow regulations. And this is something that our mindset need to adjust to. As you mentioned, for people, for Egyptians, young Egyptians who moved abroad and worked abroad, got a lot of, let's say, in touch with reality and how to, it is very important and vital to follow regulations. Egyptians, though, in the past, were not used to that. Now, with the new regulations, you just need adjustment. You need to be able to readjust yourself into the system to be able to excel. And the part that is due from the government is done, and now we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, some Egyptians starting to actually put themselves back on track, and a lot of Egyptians coming from back from abroad, ready to see and actually benefit from this opportunity, are back. Because let's be real here, there is also a factor of personal interest in making your country great again.
Yes.
So all these Egyptians who want to realize that dream also have in mind their own personal interest. And you see that this is actually happening. You have a lot of success stories happening in the past years. You can see them all over social media, and it's becoming a huge platform. It's very easy. If you even search for the word successful business in Egypt, you'll find thousands of ideas. So I think it's the wheels start turning, and now we hope that the rail is on the right track, which we can see today it is on. And we hope that the population keeps themselves on the right track to get forward.
Yes, I asked you about the Egyptians living abroad and how they look at Egypt now under the new system, under the new vision. But how do you see the initiative of the government of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to be reaching out for the Egyptians living abroad and trying to be gaining from their experience living outside of Egypt and bringing back the experience and the expertise that they gained outside of Egypt? How do you see the importance of such a step by the government now?
It's again vital, as my colleague mentioned. You've mentioned one example for the loader, the engineer who was approached to actually design or work on the assistance in the design. We have huge tycoons in construction all over the world. Software development in the rest of Europe. So the approach onto actually getting in touch with Egyptians, give them this, I would say, understanding that they are important for their country. They can give back and they can actually benefit. So this feeling in itself, the feeling of being important and being needed, is very important for the people living abroad to understand. And now you look at how the Egyptian government and His Excellency's approach to deal with people outside of Egypt. We've seen an example of our Egyptian nationals who were in China and were brought back in a few seconds. So this is the mentality that His Excellency is using now. So we're so close, and we want you, and we need you, and we need your help. And this is a national, let's say, dream. So let's build it together.
But I would like to add just one point to what Engineer Ahmed is saying, is that yes, foreign living abroad, Egyptians living abroad are important, but the wheels are in motion whether they are part of it or not. So we have a lot of national expertise as well that did not get the chance to actually shine.
Yes.
True.
So we're not dependent 100%, and let that be clear. And not it's not that you need.
A connection.
There is a connection, yes, but because it becomes more of a peacock approach that because I've lived abroad I can.
The exposure is important, but it's not the only.
Exactly. The things, the plan is going to go forward. The vision is going to be done. The know-how will be transferred one way or another, whether it's national constituents or not, or foreign living abroad.
Internet.
Yeah, we're in the era of the globalization, so we can get anything we need through a screen,
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
So.
And we did speak about the
efforts of the government and the vision of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to be having a fully made loader in Egypt in the past week. We did see in the inauguration of the military factory 300 in the attendance of the president, and of course with the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. We'll be seeing in the upcoming year the production of electric vehicles by the Ministry of Military Production as well. About 500 buses will be produced by the upcoming year, so we'll be seeing more in the upcoming report about that.
Ministers and officials from the Italian company Eni had earlier inaugurated the first integrated station in Egypt for natural gas, liquid fuel and electric car charging. The station is located in the scope of Al-Manakh district, established in cooperation with Eni. A ceremony was held for this special occasion, starting with a film about that new station, then a word of welcome to the ministers and governor, and then a briefing on the Downtech company responsible for setting up the new station in cooperation with Eni. The officials inspected the station sections and its internal cafeteria and witnessed an experimental model for charging an electric car. In cooperation with China's Photon Company, the Ministry of Military Production is set to produce affordable electric mini-cars dubbed e-motion cars. The ministry also celebrated a new project to manufacture electric buses in the country in partnership with China's Photon Motor. The statement further announced that these cars are not qualified to be driven on normal Egyptian streets and are allowed only in compounds, hotels and resorts. However, details regarding other versions of the electric cars that will be allowed on the streets is set to be announced later.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and as we did see in the past report that the whole world is moving towards producing electric cars, and we will be seeing that in Egypt by the month of November. How do you see such a statement by the Ministry of Military Production?
Completing the vision in the administrative capital. It has been already integrated to have EV electric chargers and having even light poles that operate on 8 platforms, providing data, providing electricity. You can pay your bills from it, a lot of things that you can use from just a pole, light pole. So it's the normal sequence of events to complete what has been actually integrated into the new city's infrastructure by providing the vehicles that can be used for it. So definitely it's part of the vision, and it's going forward very strongly and according to plan.
Yes, how do you see the statement of the Ministry of Military Production, and where does this leave Egypt in terms of the consumption of gasoline as well? As we did see in the past, it was considered a huge problem.
Well, this is a subject very close to my heart, which is green. So sustainability, being green, looking into our future and future generations, how to take care of this planet in a big scale, and for Egypt in a very, let's say, narrowed down scale. So you look at reduced amount of gasoline. It's no news to anyone that Egypt is very crowded, so the amount of gasoline-run cars, whether the gasoline is normal gas or diesel or even natural gas, it's the same. The amount of exhaust that comes out of such vehicles is unbelievable. Cairo specifically is very populated, and if you look at the amount of cars in Cairo that can be replaced with electric cars probably in few years, even if this percentage is like 20%, that's a big achievement. And if you look at the Egypt consumption of oil or requirements of oil in general, Egypt is a producing country for oil, but maybe in 2 years we can see that Egypt is sufficient with its current with its natural resources. We will have no need for imports, which will again reduce the liability on this government to actually have a lot of dues and have to pay for a lot of imported raw materials. So I think this is a first step, not the first, because we've seen also smaller governors working on actually through a green approach. We've seen the Red Sea governorate removing all first-use plastic, and all this kind of enhancement into a sustainable environment will definitely help on our standard of living in a few years. So I think it's a very important and an amazing step.
Do you think that the electric cars have the opportunity to be thriving here, or we don't have any other way in terms of the globalization as well, in the same idea? The whole world is going green, as Engineer Ahmed said.
Well, in order for it to thrive, we need to provide, we need to do some other mitigations. For instance, on one side there is the electric car manufacturing, but in order to provide a market sector for the car to pick up, it needs to provide the certain needs of each driver, at the same time suitable for the usage. When you look in parallel what's happening in the market, there are a significant growth in the Chinese imports, especially with the car prices going up after the devaluation of the currency. So it becomes an unbalanced projection of what's happening on the real streets. So unless we start doing some mitigations in terms of regulating that an electric car becomes for a certain income category a mandatory thing. With all due respect, if you have the money to buy an electric car, don't go buy a car which is V8 that produces that much amount of greenhouse gases that impacts the vision for greenery, that puts dues and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So it's mandatory, and if you actually buy a car that does that, you need to be penalized, strongly penalized. And you have a lot of that, and it starts like this. When you start regulating things and start actually applying and employing the ideas that you need this car to thrive so that you would have less greenhouse emissions, and not only to the cars, the electric cars are part of a component, because believe it or not, buildings emit more greenhouse gases than the cars walking around the streets.
Buildings?
Buildings.
How's
the
that?
AC, the air conditioning that you open.
Yes.
So you keep doing those glass boxes and adding air conditioning in them and thinking, yeah, it looks very nice, but you don't know, if you look at it from another perspective, no, it's not nice. It's totally poisoning and intoxicating the environment in an incremental lifetime. So yes, in order for it to thrive, it's regulations, authority, and this goes back to having the national military authorities and the presidential administration and all other ministries actually backing and supporting the legislation, the legislation
Yes.
and changing the laws in order to have application on the ground. You can produce it. It might stay in the factory. It might not move out of the factory because nobody's going to actually use it in the actual market.
If it's cheaper, you think it would be
This is what I was going to
better
say,
marketed.
to add to what you're saying. So basically I was saying maybe reduce taxes on such cars. Maybe give it, I don't know, give it any incentive basically to be...
I think it would be cheaper anyway,
It would
right?
definitely be cheaper
Yes.
because it will be produced locally. That's for starters, and that's very important, again, like the loader. So the benefit will come to the Egyptian population. But why not even import not gasoline-run cars, but electric cars? So maybe reduce the taxes on that car, on such cars. to give the urge to capable personnel to actually purchase.
But not to forget only the incentive in terms of what Engineer Ahmed is saying.
Yes.
You need actually to start readjusting the certain infrastructure elements. For instance, you don't have that much gas stations that provide EV electricity.
Not
So,
yet, yes.
Not yet.
But we've
So
seen them. That's
we've seen them, yeah.
It's not. It's starting.
It's starting. It's
yes.
picking
It's a
up.
new,
But where do you want to start? Do you want to start from the who's going to buy at the end of the food chain, the lowest price of a car, or do you want to start with who's riding the Tesla? Where it goes, you know, this
Tesla
is
is not cheap.
Not cheap.
Not cheap, to say the least.
to say the least.
Engineer
yeah.
Ahmed H.Shamarka, the planning and development expert. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Engineer Ahmed Al-Kafrawi, the member of the Presidential Leadership Program, the PLP. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And this brings us to the end of the daily debate for tonight. Thank you for watching and goodbye.